have already doing that rather successful. That's why we would like to talk about those topics with the reps of the creative economy industries or spheres, and the IT sphere is represented here I'm a best of all. We are talking about the architectural design and applied design, and also we are talking also about outsourcing of the legal outsourcing, and to some extent it is present in Ukraine. We would like to listen to the representatives of those industries and together to come to the conclusion what prospects we have and what amount of GDP and export, given the support on the part of the state, we could think about in the nearest future, because according to some assessments, the losses in IT sphere which we have today in Ukraine unfortunately require a lot of time and rather big financial inputs. But what is the alternative way or path in Ukraine? What we have to do? We are going to talk about that and try to find the common grounds for that and paths. We will be joined shortly by Mr. Oleg Derevyanko, Deputy Minister of Education, and Ms. Olena Iskierdo, the first group from the AIMM Group. We also have the experts from in the economics field, Mr. Geyets, Mr. Savchenko, and reps of our creative industries. And perhaps I'll try to introduce from the point of view of the IT sphere, and then those who we did not mention yet, maybe you can briefly introduce yourselves. So the EPAM company in Ukraine is represented by Mr. Antonyuk, chairman of the society. EPAM is one of the biggest, world's biggest players in the outsourcing market. We are talking about the Central and the Eastern European countries, and in Ukraine we have more than 3,000 persons who are busy in this industry providing services. EPAM also the materializer, which represents today this sector. Well, actually we can switch over to our friendly creative industries, so please following the clockwise order. Microphone. My name is Yegor Borshevsky. I'm CEO of Postmodern Digital. We develop the visual effects for the cinema, for the movies. We produce the movies, and we develop on the cross-media content today. Oleksandr Tkachenko, 1+1 Media. Previously we imported, now we actually make our own movies. Yuriy Made in Ukraine project. Well, to the biggest extent, perhaps, I tried to develop the Ukrainian companies, Ukrainian manufacturers, to push them to the surface and promote their activities on territory of Ukraine. And those deal with the mass market projects. For example, they deal with the clothes, with the footwear, hairdressing industry, hairstylists, whatever. They do everything so that we could replace some kind of import by the Ukrainian produce. Hello to everyone. My name is Katerina Bashkova, representing Ukraine, the global freelance platform Upwork. Earlier it was known as Freelancer Desk. And the key efforts of ours, we make it possible for the Ukrainian talents to find very good, let's say, orders all over the world. We are talking about the external markets work. Konstantin Kozhemyaki, I'm the owner of the, let's say, the polygraphy company. We reached success using the instruments tools of creative economy, and we created the platform Chernozem, Black Soil, this information resource, the library of the creative economy Chernozem, and the creative service to promote the creative economy of Ukraine. Igor Stefanovich, Director of the Department of IT Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Our task, if you're talking about the IT sphere, to find IT projects and to implement them as soon as possible, especially we are talking about the public sector or PPP sector. Oleksandr Sternets, I represent the Secretariat and the Committee in the Verkhovna Rada on the issues of informatization and communication. My name is Iskierdo. I'm the CEO in the project group, AIMM Group. We deal with architecture, engineering, consulting in the residential, office, industrial design, introduction of the up-to-date technologies and promoting and giving the conditions for the Ukrainian designers to hit not only the CIS markets but the European market as well. Valeriy Geyets, Director of the Institute of Economy and Forecasting at the Academy of Sciences. For you to understand better, for the latest work which we present here, which is associated with IT sector as well, Innovation Ukraine 2020, the national, in our national report, we demonstrate the innovation possibilities for Ukraine and opportunities also in this sector. So perhaps in this respect, well, not to switch over to some stories, we could listen to them a bit later. I would like to ask our respected guests, the macroeconomic sphere representatives, to evaluate what economic losses were incurred by Ukraine of late, and actually what we have to. You were talking about the creative economy of the knowledge, what we'll have to do to restore this strict weight. Just the scope of the tragedy, so to say, what we are going to deal with. And then it would be interesting to see separately what hindrances we have, what barriers, and how to find the common denominator in order to what can we do with some non-traditional sectors in the economy or industries, so to say, what we have to do for our country, for our state. How would you assess the losses incurred by economy of Ukraine during this wartime and other problems?
You can find rather conflicting assessments to this, and I believe that the losses potentially are important because we lost some objects of infrastructure which could not be restored very quickly, and the second is that we cannot plan now in middle term and long term framework, and this also means that the potential for the future will be formed later, because currently the attention is focused on the war. The second component is that we now are more thinking how to tackle the current problems, how to resolve the current issues. We are very much dependent on external funding, despite the fact that we have considerable internal resources which are not legalized, and those resources could be involved into building up the prospects for the future. That's why the current situation is quite different from the previous two crises which we experienced during independence, and we cannot take those two previous crises as for learning lessons. Also, then second component is that despite the fact that Ukraine is a country with market economy, in many aspects it is characterized as a quasi-economic country, and this also hinders our development. And in this context, the IT sector also functions not fully in the legal field. This is also the quasi-market situation, and we should improve this to develop the prospects for the future. I won't pay so much attention to the losses. I think that we should think about potential that's more productive for the future, and this was the reason why we eagerly participate in this roundtable. Anything that could be taken as a new economy, as the IT sector development should be in the focus of our attention, because we realize that under current circumstances all these aspects are delayed for the future. Now we can see that this year, maybe the next year, or the ongoing 2-3 years, we won't have any economic growth, and that's why we have to look carefully at those internal points of growth which we have. We should focus attention at the sectors which are able to bring us to the future about which we would like to dream. Thank you very much. Now I can see Oleksandr Savchenko is eager to speak. I'm a macroeconomist, and I'm rector of the International Business Institute. This is internationally recognized business school, which is included into top 200 accredited business schools. So this means that we can develop a product which is competitive here in Ukraine. Now, speaking about macroeconomy, about conditions in which the economy will function here in Ukraine, and about the sectors which are represented here today. My assessment is as follows. This year, GDP will drop down 10%, inflation will be 50%, the exchange rate by the end of the year will be 28 hryvnia, and drop in the real income of population which is important for the audience, will be up to 30%. Now we have 25%, we will have 30% more drop in real income. Now conditions for the preconditions for the next year. It's understandable that this year is already lost. For the next year, we have the same grave predictions. The GDP will continue to fall by 2-3%, or even if it would grow to 3%, then for us it won't be growth. For poor countries as we are, the growth rate should be between 8 and 9% to be felt by business and population. Then inflation will be at the level of 15%, exchange rate will stabilize at the level of 30-32 hryvnia.
доходів населення припиниться.
Drop in the income of people will stop, but it won't grow up. I took several measurements in 1992, 1993. At that time, our month's wages was $10-15. This is approximately equivalent of the wages that we have now. The purchase power of dollar has also dropped almost 5 times during the period of time from 1990s, and this is equal to what we have today. Nobody expects that the reforms will happen in this country, because Ukrainian reforms are inconsistent. The positive things: devaluation kills local market. Ukrainian market is not interesting for import, but it opens export markets, and those who can do something for export, they start to reorient for export. The savings of people, they very quickly melt down. The income of people go down, and savings go down too. But the external markets are getting opened, but are they opened or not? We cannot be sure, because the government is not thinking about it. Up to 5% of the European market is open for us. These are extraordinary opportunities for our businesses. That is what we did not have in 1991-93. Next year, probably we will reach the agreement with the United States, free trade agreement, and we will be able to export to the United States, to Canada, etc. And thus 50% of the global world will be opened for Ukrainian businesses, and the less you deal with the government officials, customs officers, etc., tax inspectors, etc., you immediately start to stagnate. And this is one of the secrets, the IT is so commercially successful, because they do not deal with government officials in general. Everybody has to understand that this is the time for appearance of Bill Gates and Wozniak. Sandy Warhol also worked in that area. The technical processes are so simple that everybody who is creative and can design things can do this in Ukraine and produce Ukrainian goods. This is good news. What is the bad news? The bad news is that we won't have finance and investments. I'm surprised with the position of the Minister of Finance, which delays with negotiations with international creditors. This is around 19 million per day losses of credits and investments. When the official statement about technical default was made, this resulted that potential investors will try to escape from Ukraine and abstain from it for 2-3 years. That's why we expect that there won't be any default. And now we are thinking about the niches which do not require a lot of investment and credits. This is creative spheres, knowledge industries, etc. And the last thing which I wanted to state eventually. I'm very happy that we have some government officials here. I always try to educate ministers. When I reach some level of their education, they immediately change and I start from scratch with another minister.
If you take our GDP, we're talking about GDP is declining by 10% or decrease in the developed countries. GDP is created by services, by restaurants, IT services, lawyers, movie producers. The more the countries develop, the more is the share of this sector. The rest of the industry, agriculture, and construction industry, those traditional industries. When I was talking to Azar, he could not understand. No, the music cannot create GDP. Construction, agriculture, and industry, and he failed to understand that. Anyway, that it can create, even science can create GDP. Education makes contribution to GDP. Moreover, the Great Britain musical industry is several percent of GDP. To be exact, 4%. I didn't want to mention that. They had about 4 to 5, and this share decreased because their competitors are on the world, from Sweden, for example. So 4% of GDP of England is the 100% the economy of Ukraine. You know, this is the musical industry, the industry of music, and this is very important to realize to our new, perhaps ministries or the MPs, where we have the huge reserves. The agriculture dooms country to poverty, industry poverty, the innovation and services. This is the wealth, because you won't find any country where the share of the construction industry or agriculture is more than 50%, and they're not rich countries; they are poor countries. So you absolutely aptly said that with at least with the name of the conference, and we have to popularize this development along those lines. Thank you. Well, actually, I can echo what you said by 99%. But you will have to keep in mind that European countries, members of the EU, they set themselves the task to achieve the industry share from 15% to slightly more than 20% of the GDP. So their task is to increase the role of the specific sector of the economy, and actually this opens those specific vistas to implement those sectors which are represented here. So we have to keep that in mind, because this work in the European Union is on the go, starting from Great Britain and all the way to the successful Czech Republic, etc., etc. So we cannot forget about that, because those are one of our most important trade partners. Thank you. I understand that Oleksandr Savchenko, you also export the educational services, yeah? Our wish is to reach the understand that the creative industry in the economy is not only IT. This is the biggest. Maybe it will remain to be the biggest, but there are some industries which work along the similar principles, based on similar business principles. There is some edge between the design, creativity, and programming in this sphere. Mr. Yuriy Lewandowski, director and the founder of the Internet World company, maybe he can confirm that this is a very thin line. So maybe it can come over to some proposals. Ms. Iskierdo said that we can actually come up with some proposals to export architecture to some Western, maybe not only Western countries, For the designers in Ukraine, perhaps it would be right to say that most easy is to export during the first stage, what was the case over the last 2 years, the export to the CIS market, where this language and mental barrier, it's mentally present there. The issue of being oriented to the Western or the Far Eastern markets is a long-term perspective, actually, which is the orientation for the design companies, for the construction companies, even the European developed countries, the construction companies work for China and the Far Eastern countries. Today, perhaps I would like to evaluate the design industry, if I may put it this way. It's roughly speaking, we are talking about the state of complete degradation, a very difficult economic situation, which actually 2 years ago canceled the attractiveness of this country. In the project which have been implemented, 90% this is live construction, so to say, in the social sector. The social sector, where we have the minimization of absolutely all the expenses of the, also minimization of the design solutions, the let's say the cost of this kind of services, again the cost of the 1 square meter of constructed space. So it runs to zero, so to say, minimum investments and the fastest possible return of the investor's money. As for the vision of the future or the near future prospects, how can we grow if we are going to adapt to European standards? You know. And we're going to sell our service to Europe. Like the crisis back in 2008, when the construction industry actually declined or collapsed, actually. We have to further develop our skills, study European norms, and the level of legislation. We are talking about the introduction and adjustment or adaptation of the European norms and standards, so that the Ukrainian designers could do their jobs based not on our state standards and the construction standards and norms, but also to orientate themselves to some Western standards and norms. So the near future will be associated with this kind of adaptation. So let's hope that within this period of time, the investments will come or return to Ukraine, and there will be some kind of animation in the Ukrainian construction market, and the Ukrainian designers will work also on the foreign countries. So without the domestic market, it would be difficult for us to enter the foreign markets. Today, 90-95% of the designers actually work on the Ukrainian market, domestic market, and they are making only the first steps to enter the foreign markets. Sorry to intervene, but there is some kind of food for thought. There are some researches and studies carried out globally. I know about those. Whatever has to be constructed in the West has been already constructed. The rest will be constructed in the East and other regions. There are the plans for the next 15-20 years. So it's very important for you to master the European norms and standards. And already today, to go there, and this report of the global nature, which I mentioned, was done or carried out 5 years ago, and your Western competitors know that only too well. So if within 1 or 2 years, if you do not mobilize yourselves, you'll have, unfortunately, to deal with the domestic problems of construction, and it would be nice if they will start to develop in 3 to 5 years. So you have to consider the global nature of that. You're absolutely right. Those studies, the results of those studies, research are still topical today, but to enter the Far East market, they are guided by the general norms of designing. We have to study those, and on a legislative level, we have to bring them closer to the European norms and standards, because the European school has the longest history based on the years and years of studying the construction industry and introduction of modern technologies, and actually the East is oriented toward those norms and standards. Microphone, please. Thank you. The vision department, Mr. Tkachenko, 1+1. I'm thankful to this conference for one thing, which is not propagated in any other country. In addition to the hard currency credits, which they're going to give us, another possibility to develop the export potential. Under conditions of the decline of the market, we can see that by the decline of the TV and the advertisement market. Actually, if you're talking about the development of domestic market within the next 2 years, to us as the industry, we cannot talk about that even. In this connection from import, from the expenditures which we actually used to do previously, when we spent hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the Russian content, there are some independent branches which can attract investments here. We're talking about the tens of millions of hard currency. We are not talking about the making of our, let's say, series movies, or let's say they're not expected in Turkey or in Latin America next year. The export of cereals could reach $2 billion according to the Turkish ministry. So to us, those are not realistic figures. But there are two industries which are not very much spoken about, but which are promising to small countries. We are talking about the export of services, which we can render here to our Western customers. I'm talking about the services to make movies, serials, or the advertisement video. And unfortunately, here we depend a lot on our state. We, from point of view of the tax holidays, and this will promote the development of industry in Hungary. For example, within 2 years after they introduced tax holidays, they have about 150 million of euros. They actually invested in the development of 2 film studios, and the incomes increased to threefold in the amount of services. We do not have those figures in the open sources, but we know that those figures exceed Ukrainian indicators 5 or 6 times. In Ukraine we do not have any conditions to that. Only owing to the devaluation of hryvnia, the people start to come here to have those services. But actually, we are talking about the increase in the number of jobs, creating new jobs in Ukraine, and according to our calculation, we are talking about $100 to $200 million if we provide those services here, export of services I'm talking about, to those people who come here. And what's nice about that, not only this export of services, we are talking about new jobs here for our citizens. Another branch is the making formats of ideas. 3 or 4 countries are not the huge countries from point of view of the population, but huge countries from point of view ideas and thought. Netherlands, Great Britain, and Israel. Israel placed thirds. We're talking about the ideas of recreational ideas and cereals. Those markets, they are hundreds of millions of dollars strong. We are far away from that. We'll be blessed if at least several of the ideas will be on the go. But again, it's enough to have the 1 or 2 successful stories, and you'll be on the market of the ideas, etc. Microphone. I would like to underline, emphasize the importance of this idea of the export of the generating industries in Ukraine. If we do not do that, actually we do not have any chances for rehabilitation of our economy. Sorry, but I promised to comment all your ideas from point of view of macroeconomy. What you mentioned, export potential owing to the devaluation. Where we find ourselves today, after the leaps of the rates and prices in the year, we are now in the end of the year 1994. And the export which can be formed owing to devaluation can be exhausted within half a year or 1 year. So the reserve is not big here. And we should not hope that this will continue in the future. Hardly so, because under the influence of the IMF, we'll bring the fluctuations of the rates and the prices, and then we'll have a very bad picture for the investments. You were right in different story. The creating conditions for trade, which we have to work continuously, and one of the top priority tasks for the government, And number two, what you mentioned, that this is the privilege which can, for some period of time, be given by the government. And today, we are working within the agreement with organizers what kind of privileges can be created by the government. And we're talking about the tax privileges, but you have to keep in mind that those are not going to be a lengthy one, at least maximum for 1 or 2 years. They cannot, the country will not be able to support those holidays for a long time. So you can use this potential to do something within 1 or 2 years. The experience of other markets shows that it's enough to launch this mechanism, and given the creativity which is in this country, which allowed us to export our cereals to Russia, we'll be able to do that within 1 or 2 years. So we'll be able even to export the format. I worked for some time at the STB TV. Did we have any precedents? 1+1 media, we have one president. We did not make too much money, but we made some money. But we are seriously working on this aspect now. You are talking about the global aspect. Mr. Austin would be very interesting to talking about that. We are talking about $200 million. What period of time it will take to do that if we are creating necessary tax privileges? We are talking about maybe some educational policy, development of the different classes. I'm talking about 200 million, not from the point of view of formats, but rendering these services. Some of the cinema groups coming here, if I understand correctly, this market is between $40 and $60 million. This is objective reality today. Given the tax privileges, we can reach 200 million level within 1 or 2 years. This ceiling. Can we talk about 300, 400 million in 5 years from now? This is a very specific market, and a lot of things which happen here, you won't find the open figures, with the exception of those countries which openly declare those centers. In our case, we can the forecast is very difficult. So we can extensively grow for a long period of time. Understand the perception in Ukraine, the location where we can. In some of the Western customers, which available here, they have a limited space. Devaluation is the short-term period, but unfortunately salaries of Ukrainians differ a lot from the Croatians and Slovakians or Czechs, and this difference will be there here for another at least 5 years. So we can talk that if certain conditions are created, in the long-term perspective, this growth can be limited to $100 or $200 million. Maybe Mr. Nukin will correct me if necessary. 20 years ago, we were worth about several hundred millions. What I'm talking about, we are talking about hardware, software is different story. We are just in the very beginning of the road of this business. When the educational policy promotion of Ukraine, what Mr. Geyets was talking about, either is any kind of application. These are huge importance, but even without that promotion, it would be sufficient to demand some kind of the tax privileges or easy terms in our industrialists have to learn the English first of all. Thank you a lot.
Я думаю, что мы
I believe that together we will be able to organize the Union of New Industries and promote Ukrainian sector successfully. Now, so we have discussed IT production and architecture. We were joined by a colleague. I'm an architect too. Okay, we have dealt with your sector, Konstantin. Will you please show a movie? This movie shows several interviews. You refer to the Great Britain, to the United Kingdom. Creative economy in our today's reality is not the top priority for the majority of people. What I heard about creative economy, this is a more distant, more abstract thing. You have to go deeply in this sphere and to understand how beneficial it is for us. I believe that if creative economy someday will become interesting for and understandable for designers. Now I take this as business management in creative sector. The references you made about successes of the United Kingdom, yes, the United Kingdom occupies a leading position in the world. The United States joins it, but all the successes of that country started from the fact that the critical mass of population and managers in creative sectors very seriously take this sector. They change the psychology, they change their approach, the self-employment, they are very creative, they rely upon themselves, they strengthen horizontal ties. This is Z generation, or what is called the creative class. Those who started from scratch, they spent at least 2 years for building up this approach. Not long ago, I visited East history of this path. And I like to go to Estonia to see how the clusters cooperate, how accelerators contribute to the successes. And when I ask them, can I get the training program? Yes, you can, but you will waste your money because there is no demand in professional knowledge, because in your country top management do not understand what it is. Again, the Estonians spent 2 years for creating the discourse. They created the professional unions, and they have put this issue about creative education on agenda, and that in this context our today's discussion is very useful. Also, what does Ukraine lack also? I agree with Oleksandr that we should not we should not rely upon external borrowings, but for the creative economy, The low entry threshold is peculiar and low low entry costs. But here the copyright protection and intellectual property right protection becomes the issue. And the next, government officials. What prevents Ukrainian to sign the creative agreement with Europe? The European Union representative had been working for 2 months in Ukraine in order to prepare a documentation package to get a 20 million euro grant for speeding up the process. Unfortunately, this effort was wasted by the Ministry of Culture and the NGOs. The same person successfully worked with Georgia, with Moldova, with Armenia, but Ukraine wasted this chance. And my weak hope is that why did they fail? That they did not have business representatives. That group of people comprised just government officials and NGOs. There were no real industrious people. That's why I've created the platform of creative economy, which is called the Black Soil. It comprises the library of creative economy, and once in 3 months we publish a book which amounts to, the list of these books amounts to 23 books. Each publication is backed up by the visit of the author, events, business classes, and we organize business classes in business schools, etc. And what are your recommendations as to our competitive factors? What do Ukraine lack? What does Ukraine lack? We put aside the intellectual property rights because not just intellectual property rights, but any property rights in Ukraine are to be protected via Cyprus, not in Ukraine. What are our competitiveness factors and what do we lack? I might be mistaken, but as far as I remember, all the measures of the intellectual level of a nation show that the intellectual index is rather high in Ukraine. For the Germans who think in very concrete way, for them it's easier to create a Mercedes than to invent a Facebook. The Ukrainians have more high creative potential, but they lack interaction between different creative people. And when such people meet, they create a joint discourse. So one of the most important tasks today on the path of creative economy creation is to form a discourse.
Относительно немцев и украинцев.
Now about the Germans and the Ukrainians. I like statistics. The average German citizen reads 8 times more books than the Ukrainians and goes to the theater 12 times or more often than average Ukrainians and spends at least a dozen of times more money on culture than average Ukrainians. So please do not pretend that we are well-educated, cultural and creative nation. Unfortunately, the situation is adverse now, and some representatives does not change this fact. We should be more self-criticizable. And the Germans most probably may hire the talents to make good design for the BMW. And also one remark, the Estonian example is not the best one for us. I'm quite familiar with the situation in Estonia. What did Estonia do? They completely followed the goods and technologies which they acquired from Finland. They simply subordinated to the structure which was previously developed by Finland, and we do not have such a promoter as Finland was for Estonia. But nevertheless, to what my colleague Savchenko mentioned, you cannot reform the entire education and get a good outcome. Let us organize retraining in all these spheres in order to match your standards based on the people which we have. In the Institute of Sociology, I have special units which prove that both in the country and in business, only 50% of managers comply with the up-to-date requirements. Something happened to the mic. Thank you, Konstantin. What you said about creative Europe, we will try to correct the situation. About the split of spheres in creative economy, as a representative of IT sphere, I would like to mention that we are currently implementing the project IT sphere. Those who produce soft, make regular products. I encourage you to investigate what data we can use for commercial purposes. Let us cooperate on this basis. I would like to ask you to sum up maybe, or maybe you will give the floor to Yuriy Antonyuk from EPAM, who now switched to the high marginal services, and I think that it will take a long path to reach the full protection of the property or intellectual property rights, but nevertheless we have high marginal services, and we have outsourcing 2.1 version.
It's my pleasure to participate in this roundtable, and to me it was kind of something unexpected, despite the fact that we have different industries. But in fact, I look what is being done in our company. We are mostly doing what my colleagues were talking about. We are more involved in creative work. We deal with those companies which are involved in service design or industrial design. Is something that at the age of IT, as we understand that, and the creative sphere, digital marketing. This is whatever is in frontline now. At frontline now, IT is changing the world over. And once again, I would like to say that this is in resonance with the topic of this roundtable topic. I mean, so for us to understand how it can, in such a country as ours, to build a successful industry, what it requires. When EPAM started to operate in Ukraine, it was in 2005. Those days, the market, according to this year's fresh data several weeks ago of the National Bank of Ukraine, I mean, the export market was $42 billion. In other words, the Ukrainian companies and enterprises, and the private companies, they actually earned $42 billion through the export of computer services. And now, as Victor mentioned, we are talking about $2 billion. Our national bank comes up with a conservative figure about $1.5 billion. But anyway, if you think about that, the difference is 40 times. And none of the industry in Ukraine was growing 40-fold, you know, those years. We start from a very small section, that's why this big difference. But I would like to say that the average percent of growth of this industry, or the export aspect of that over the last few years, if we're talking about the average crisis years, 2008 to 2009, we are talking about 30% of growth every year. And we know how to further grow this industry. It's already integrated in the European economy, in the economy of the United States, in the Far East economy, because we are present there, we are working there. I'm talking not about the company, I mean the Ukrainian IT companies community. We already integrated there. We know how to grow further on. We know how to hit in 4 or 5 years the level of $10 billion. We know where to find the people, the rest of people in Ukraine, so where to invest money. So this is, in fact, the example where, despite any kind of the assistance or non-interference on the part of the state in this sphere, we can build the successful economy, creative economy. Once again, I repeat myself, IT is changing. The companies depart from the stereotype of freelance. By the way, I can't say anything bad in that. But we try to reach or to achieve the next tier of our preparation, can compete with the neighboring brands. And we are doing the work which is no worse than Facebook or Apple or anything else. Of course, I can give you several examples. For example, only our company, if we are talking about the top 10 more successful IT companies in the United States, we rank 6, and we lead the way. We are higher than Apple, you know, there. And I agree that Ukraine is rather attractive and promising potential for the growth of many innovation technologies, innovation trends or directions. And if the state will not interfere too much in our work, what I mean to say, not that there will be some privilege or something like that, but if they do not change too often the rules of the game, for example, when you come to your place of work and you come to know that something has changed, if you don't have to restructure your direction of economy, then such industries will be developing more fast and more successfully. The export is kind of the middle class, what is created by the industry, because all those billions of dollars to those people, okay, 70% of that amount of money is spent for the salaries. And actually, in fact, we are talking about the payment for the job done. And actually, those money they're spending inside this country. They buy the apartments and the vehicles for that money, and this creates jobs. We are not talking about tens of billions of dollars. This is a chain which can give us creation of some additional industries which will be kind of at the edge, bordering, so to say, industries. You can actually suspect that I'm too much praising IT, but the IT is the only industry where I can talk to a schoolboy. Come here and we can make your career without some kind of special connections or acquaintances. The only thing you have to do to study well and study about 4 or 5 years in university, and then you can open the whole world, because such persons are accessible everywhere. It's a good idea when the young people understand that they can build their career here in this country and not to emigrate to some other country. This is the third very important item which I would like to emphasize here. The creative economies are very important for the people who can visualize that they can do something here. And to crown it all, once again, speaking about the industry, what we are doing. Well, I agree with my colleagues who say that all these this is some kind of singular examples in Ukraine, not that successful, but once again I would like to repeat, if we manage to preserve approximately the same terms and conditions which we had over the last 10 years, then we'll be able to do in Ukraine much more. Not only we're talking about export IT, we were busy but all those people who work together with us, they actually make their own startups. Of course, there's a big problem with startups, because actually all of those who achieve some level when this will be attractive to investors, they leave this sphere. This is a different problem which deserves a separate talk or roundtable. But if you're talking about IT service, it can create a very good foundation for the neighboring industries like the food technologies or product technologies, and the industries which are associated with some additional services which have been mentioned here repeatedly. And of course, all the creative things. Once again, I repeat myself, we should not think that IT companies is a set of the programming engineers or testing experts. If we are talking about the latest projects we are implementing with our different partners or clients, those people who are involved in different kinds of design strategy, design business consulting, their number is about 30%, and programming less than 50%, So this creates absolutely new eco-structure, a new layer of the people who are much required here, badly needed here. So far, we do not have them, but we know how to do that. Only what we have, you should not make our life more difficult, not to interfere too much. Again, we were joined by Oleg Derevyanko, the Deputy Minister of Education. We were talking a lot. What can we do in creative way, educate somebody, and what we touched upon the promotion in Ukraine, this unique experience in promotion, what is produced here, non-standardized industries which have been amassed. This is an experience by Yuriy. So thanks a lot for the project you're implementing. You have kind of, you have to find some, not only for tangible, or not only for non-tangible things. I represent here the class which actually produce whatever we can touch with our hands. I do not agree with non-standardized. For 3 years I've been communicating with the small businesses which produces or makes the product which can be used on a daily basis, starting from the toothbrush and all the way to the dresses, suits, and things which we use, well, let's say the detergents which we use on a daily basis. Over this 3 years period of time, I had a chance to communicate with about 1,500 companies, me personally. I was traveling, I was testing, and I was touching with my own hands, demonstrated, promoted, etc., etc. Number one, first of all, I would like to confirm what I saw in your video. None of the people, the best case, only 3%, they understand that they have to make use of the services of creative economy. This is a kind of exaggeration on my part. In the majority of cases, some of our entrepreneurs who produce something, unfortunately, not that they did not know that they have to hire the creative personnel or IT personnel, managers, etc., but they do not plan it to do in the near future. Those people who are represented here, they are most lucky. I'm coming to that, because on the wave of this kind of patriotism and, there is kind of economic patriotism wave. Somebody's managed to do some startup and make a lot of money on T-shirts. When they launched this experiment in 2014, the first message that our manufacturers, they're trying to hide away from our customers in this country, to say nothing about the foreign customers. They try to hide themselves behind the German Italian companies. On the way of economic patriotism, they skyrocketed, if you're talking about business. They achieved the profits which they did not expect. In the majority of cases, they cannot today, let's say, meet the demand, because everybody understood that they can buy a dress for 17 euros. Why should they pay for some Spanish for 60 euros if they can pay only 17 euros for the same same quality dress? Many of the companies were not prepared for this interest on the part of the customers. And now we switch over to expert. I can retort. You said that we have open markets. The other day I had a festival to promote everything Ukrainian. This is the first festival in Ukraine, and I'm trying for the next several times to get it out to some foreign countries. The most important question we have to ask, we do not answer. We do not have a single company in Ukraine which is prepared to undertake commitments and to export the products or the goods on a normal price. This is the first problem which our Ukrainian manufacturers encounter. We can kind of find the demand in the English language. We can make photos according to the brokerage. We can make a good website and promote it in Google and find some foreign customers, clients. And the first problem they encounter, talking about the manufacturer, the custom service, which is invincible, inactionable, unmovable, whatever. And we cannot bypass their laws and rules of the games. In other words, we cannot in a legal way to launch export, just to trade from here as an internet shop. I'm not talking about big batches or whatever, but step by step to explain the situation. Number two, logistics. There is not a single, let's say, delivery of supply companies which can, you understand, pose. This is kind of Russian roulette. Sorry, I'm forced to say that because I'm working with, let's say, close to their things every day. In the best case, in 20% of the cases, the goods will reach the client or customer, United States or Europe. Yes, it costs about 13 to 15 euros or dollars, whether we provide follow-up or not, or tracking. 80% are somewhere in the thin air, in the skies. There is another item which unfortunately is not taken into consideration. Now we can talk about big-time deliveries. We can provide trade using the internet shops, FedEx, DHL. Not all the customers are prepared to pay 30 or 40 extra dollars for the delivery, and we know that the t-shirts cost here $13-15. We all understand that, and we can correlate the prices, and the company which can try to find out the way how to trade, wholesale trade. They find the partners, and seemingly they have an agreement with customs, and they know how to export that, and they found a logistic company. But here, anybody who at least once tried to legally get the currency back from the foreign partners, they understand what I'm talking about. Also, we have to keep in mind that to get that currency, if I'm mistaken, just correct me, there is some kind of 70% mandatory sales, right? When I was working, was 50 now, 75. You have to sell the currencies and to buy it back, because 90% of Ukrainian companies on this market are working or on the western parts, you know, or let's say to buy the buttons or the clothes or the lock, or let's say the varnishes or the paints for the hair paints, whatever. And again, if you can resolve the issue, the problem with the customs logistics, but the issue associated with getting money, it's practically impossible to resolve this problem. If you're talking about the Interparty SKM company, will have the 4 financial directors and 10 financial managers and a lot of accountants, and if we have a small company with just several people working, it's impossible. So speaking about expert, I'm very pessimistic. Unless we simplify something, unless we simplify our trade or do something about that, legally or in transparent way as those sectors do, our, let's say, entrepreneurs will not be able to trade. The only legal way which were embarked upon by 4 companies, the only legal way is to just go there, let's say to work there for 3 or 4 months, to hire an apartment to your employee who you trust, to register a kind of company there, and then the launch the enterpriser. But this is not the expert. It's just one daughter company, but it's the only legal way, which is done even by small companies. Microphone, please. Microphone. We are talking about some intermediaries who are just sitting there on redistribute. Well, actually, this is nothing good in that is either. What is done by manually? No, we can talk about the large-scale entrepreneurship. Speaking about services, we should not exaggerate the number of the services or the share of the rendered services in the economy. I used to work in the advertisement PR agency. Unfortunately, number one, unfortunately, Ukrainians are too poor to buy professional services on my scale. We are not talking about the domestic market. Okay, I'm coming to that. Item 2, the tendency is that the marginal in Sweden, when they rejected the handicraft, let's say, they have a contrary tendency, and they forecast for the next decade, the return to the vocational schools, to the handicraft, whatever can be done manually, you know. This is according to the those companies which actually forecast the trends. So we can have a chance if we change the legislation. Well, very interesting turn. Maybe Oleg can comment regarding this kind of this term, because our trends, for example, materialized company, Mr. Roman Psychovsky, director of the company, which deals with the software for the printers. You don't have anything to do manually. You have to create a model, and the printer will print everything. I don't know, maybe this trend from point of view of this kind of quasi-employment, but maybe you should do something with our hands, not to sit on our hands, actually. But this is a kind of contrary, very interesting contrary issue. Maybe you can say something on this subject matter regarding vocational training.
Thank you, Victor. First of all, I would like to thank you for invitation. The very fact that at the round table, new industries invites representatives from the education sector, for me that's a good sign. This is very much interesting. This is important. I have a business background, and for me it's clear that all changes happen via education, whether formal or informal education. Speaking about the ministry, because you asked a question to me as to the ministry representative, we have to develop a policy which stimulates education needed for the country. Probably you did not notice that the new law on education, this is the law on professional education, or maybe on vocational training. It uses new approaches, and it is oriented to the countries which have a very developed vocational training, like Denmark, like the United States, etc., and in Austria, etc. In Austria, up to 50% of young people from the very beginning chooses vocational training because it's prestigious enough, and the university education is perceived as an education for people with pure inclination to academic work, and 80% of higher education in those countries is in the sphere of college, not the master's degrees. And the structure which we have inherited from the Soviet Union, and now our concept is to reduce the technical colleges which we have, and instead of 1,400 of them, we should have between 50 up to 120 regional multi-sided, multi-subject centers of vocational training, and those vocational training centers should reflect the regional specificities, of the economy. This will be real training, and this vocational training will include a big part of practical education, and the centers of vocational training have to be governed by and managed by the Council of stakeholders, regional businesses, local authorities, experts, etc. This is about about vocational training. I spent much time in those countries. This is the school which is included to this chain of professional orientation. The secondary school is now excluded from the process in Ukraine. I will respond to you very quickly. We need to get support from everybody to explain the idea of 12-year education. There will be primary school of 5 years, then 4 years of secondary school, and then high school, where the professional orientation takes place. And this is our vision. Thank you for this question. If we start to speak about education, then we would never finish our roundtable. Mr. Savchenko has mentioned MBA education. We have Mr. Zaslavsky, head of international relations from Savchenko University, whether we can export educational services. It could become one of our clusters. I'm happy to be present at this workshop because creative economy and innovations are one of the trends. I'm representatives of the cybernetics faculty, and our faculty is an example when we prepare students and they are very much, and there is big demand on them. Each year we send the 2-year, 3-year students to the internship to Google and Facebook, and as a faculty dean, I always ask them to make very detailed reports. Would you please speak not about IT but expert of educational services? This is a big part of our work. We have to attract foreign students. We have to develop so-called mobility for ours, be able to send our students to other universities. They should speak foreign languages, and we should involve students from other countries. In order to be able to do this, we should be able to offer security environment, secure environment, quality master's programs. Today you mentioned design. Design requires the knowledge, understanding, and IT technologies. One of the central issues which was raised today, this was interdisciplinary approach when there is a combination of ITs, biology, material studies. We have many cases when our graduates work abroad. They are IT experts, but they work in biology labs, chemistry labs, physics labs, etc. So higher education is interested in development of contacts. The companies, you should think about programs, how to cooperate with ITs. I spoke yesterday to Nikolai Rayenko, and we discussed possibilities to cooperate. So our steps towards each other, the question is whether what we need to sell more Ukrainian education. We need to have the registers of students for those. We need to have information. Publications for those in English language. People from Arabic world are very much interested. Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, the East, China, but we have the problem of programs. And the second aspect is related to China. China has a strong strong Russian language program, and we have to deliver training for them in Russia. Among young people have a good understanding that they have to learn foreign languages. And now there's a question to Oleg. I will speak very briefly. Here we have business perspective and the state strategy perspective, and we should look at this issue in these both directions. So the first aspect, how to increase our expert approach. Middle Asia, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Arabic Africa countries, where we have good positions, and for the university that could become an opportunity to raise funds. And the second component is more interesting for me, how to involve more students from OECD countries. What master's programs might be interesting for them in Ukraine? And I agree that everything here starts with the language. And in this aspect, the English language is a key language. We have professors who may teach in English, but in many universities we do not have such professors. As soon as we are able to resolve the language issue, we will move forward very quickly. From legislative point of view, we simplified many things, recognition of diplomas, we simplified for the universities a procedure how to invite professors from abroad. They need not any permit from the university, from the ministry, etc.
Please introduce yourself. Microphone. Ukrainian newspaper. In Kiev, we had 2 military colleges which, owing to Russia, were closed. One of those was universal. So you're talking about the General Military College. Why should not we restore that? Which trained actually the foreign students as well. I understand we had some practices. Regarding the English language, was absolutely aptly mentioned that a very important problem here, as we consider GDP, very important the export of our services, this plus GDP import. When our children, students or MPA, they go abroad, it's minus GDP. And the more of them stay here, this will the plus GDP. And we are talking about about $1 billion which our citizens spend. This is the terrible, fantastic figure. We have such resources. How many money is spent by foreign citizens here? We have 60,000 foreign students. No, I'm talking about MBA. We have about 3 or 4 experts, and how we resolve this problem. We issue 2 diplomas. We invite foreign, let's say, professors from the French university, for example, and they deliver lectures in English. They receive about 60 content here, and 2 diplomas ours, and 1 French university diploma. Regarding English language, it's absolutely true. And perhaps this is high time to prepare the non-formal requirements at the level of the masters, the candidates, of the good command, ready command of the English language, and make the tests, real tests and exams. You can then be issued a certificate for your money, of course, and then you can actually defend the master's paper or the doctorate. Very briefly, very differently, Nina Chalak Mohila Academy. I have several maybe provocative theses. Number 1, regarding the English language. And in fact, this is not a big problem today, because not only in the Kyiv Mohyla University, but also in Kharkiv and Ternopil, and as far as I know in Vinnytsia, they have a big number of the English language curriculum. Just for your information, 2% of our population have already command of English language. Please concentrate. Well, I just want to give you some of the thesis. Number two, in principle, we already have a platform owing to the Ministry of Education, which makes it possible, which enables us to invite the foreign lecturers and professors and also the foreign students. I'm talking about Horizon of 2020 or Erasmus Plus, etc., etc. You're talking about the students who are going to pay here for their education, right? We are talking about business like. No, we are talking about business. We are not talking about the communications or ties. Last year for the health care ministry, which doesn't have a market here in Ukraine in the curricula, we had 6 foreign students as soon as they entered our country. The Home Master's curriculum is provided in the English language. Speaking about the creative economy, also in our university, Kyiv-Mohyla University, with the support of the English University Bradford and the Italian University from Estonia, we have the curriculum which is aimed at the development of creativity and entrepreneurs' potential, and it's been done by the chair, which is specialized in the creative economy. So, yeah. No, well, thank you. We have some things which have been already created. But we were talking about not the creativity in economy, but we are talking about the creative economy. You could be creative in the retail and the other areas, but this is a different story. But anyway, thank you. And your 6 students is a good beginning. Take in consideration that we, well, indeed, I mean that. We have to promote that. I don't know. Unfortunately, this experience is not very much disseminated. Katerina Bashkova, who represents here our biggest or largest and good freelance exchange. So your vision of freelance is a kind of proto company, and many of us we started from freelance, and we switch over to a very big industry. So what is required to be successful? Problems Ukraine freelancers encounter today. You were very aptly mentioned our freelance exchange, because the Upwork, when it was just appearing here in 2012, the key team which created that, they were Ukrainian programmers. So partly this Ukraine project, which is now in the United States. If we are talking about freelance directions, which very well can be inscribed in our economy, because if we are talking about the development of the classical corporate model all the way to what can be implemented online from point of view of services and our skills, which is the key thing in freelance, could be done by such exchanges as Upwork. It's no secret that Ukraine, in particular for the brand, the Upwork is a very strategic market. Today it's the number 4 market. You were talking about the size and the money made by Ukrainian freelancers. The first 3 now the United States, India, and Philippines. But if you take Ukraine in Europe, within Europe, and we can say that this number 1 market, because Philippines is something which is associated with support, sales, and marketing. United States more legal and financial directions. We are talking about freelancers. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but again, to understand the potentiality, the sales and marketing, the people in the Philippines, the people in Philippines, they freelance, yeah, you won't believe it. They have a lot of custom services, custom support, historically, But Philippines is not an English-speaking country. It was a former Spanish colony. Actually, nothing prevents us from developing that. But historical, today, IT is number 1. And we have to pay tribute to outsourcing companies in that. By the way, the design, creative, whatever is pertaining to content or marketing, architecture, yes. Yes, by the way, in March, we had 10 top freelancers. We had a girl who is dealing with design and sailing her architectural projects. So the only thing which is difficult to find such project, if we compare them with IT developments, if you focus upon the IT developments, just the American, if you do not focus on those developments, We do not want to have this theater one actor. We would like to diversify. Several years ago, we had 40 billion. What could you advise us to develop? How we can take from Philippines our sales marketing or not? It's difficult to answer this question. Again, I'm talking now from point of view of the clients of the key markets in the United States, Canada, Australia, Israel. The key directions, what is associated with mobile and software developments. Number two, design creativity, content, those directions which really can give good impetus to Ukraine for the further development. Briefly speaking about the figures, if we take the latest Upwork statistics in 2014, Ukrainian freelancers earned $60+ billion, and what the share of the creative 84%. What we did together with the Association of Tech Staffing in the United States, if we take Ukrainian market, speaking in principle, the forecast to 2020 in 5 years, the growth is tenfold. You were talking about the amount earned by the Ukrainian freelancers, about 100 million. So we're talking about 120 million experts. Well, this is a niche, and the percentage should grow. What is what is actually in our way? Yesterday they adopted a revolutionary decision, and we, including the freelance community, where we took an active participation there. You know, and actually they created the explanatory letter sent to all the banks in Ukraine. They are not questioning whether they are prepared to work according to the scheme from the point of view on the currency control documentation. That was a key barrier which did not allow us to normally develop. Number two, in support of the English language, I would say that IT education in Ukraine. And on the other hand, the customers of other markets, they know a very powerful and strong side of Ukrainian freelancers from point of view of knowledge and theoretical basis. Maybe they still lack some practical experience. But again, the strong freelancer can become those persons who have very good experience. First of all, we are talking about outsourcing company employees, and the well-known fact that all of them work in the companies, they deal with freelance. This is in a good sense, the greediness, so to say, to try to do something on two platforms. And again, English language, strange it may sound, the IT experts, they have a problem with that. It's very difficult to find very good payable, so to say, orders. So again, as was mentioned by Yuriy, who represent here the EPAM company, would be good if they support us and help us and not interfere with our work. In those changes which were adopted yesterday, speaking about changes in the legislation, maybe this will enable Ukrainian freelancers to work more fruitfully and bring more money to this country. If we're talking about the elimination of the freelancers, this will not help us to do something. And such charismatic ideas are already present in the Minister of Finance corridor, so to say. I remember when Ustenko was against that in Verkhovna Rada, there was an idea, some committee was different name, I can't remember exactly, intellectual economy or something like that. But the sense and the idea was that there must be some economy of knowledge or whatever. Maybe after those discussions, we have to adopt the resolution of Verkhovna Rada and expand the activities of the committee further on. Most likely nobody is going to do that. The idea is not bad, so maybe you can do that, not for this parliament composition. Well, actually, we are not threatened by some kind of the early elections. We have the 9 basic laws, though we touched upon some of the tax privileges, but we understand only too well that this is a very difficult task, but we understand this, including coalition agreement. So why we did sign that? We have to do something about that. Then a very short presentation on the part of our architects. a very short one, and then, you know, because the architects is a second wind, so to say, and then we are going to have the free discussion. My name is Oleksandr Popov. I'm director of the Archimedes company. We specialize in big, major, and the large really project of the residential estate and real estate. And this comfort town is one of the graphic example of the residential complexes which have been already constructed. At the same time, this one of the leaders in the business over the last few years. Speaking about the common topic, why creative economy of late becomes more and more proactive and take more and more percentage or percent from the real economy of production, which was traditionally dominating in this sphere. We are talking about the percentage because we are living in a more and more changing world. Every year we have some new events, some developments, countries affecting each other in this process of changes, and the appearance of new technologies which affect others, which push other players in the market and the participants to some changes. This process inevitably create crisis, and the crisis, the acute phase of this process of development. And this Comfort Town project we invented back in 2009. There was a crisis after the common the global economic crisis. And the next slides are dedicated. We are talking about projects which already we can stop here. We are talking about projects offered now. We have another crisis. Again, the industries changed. Again, the demand changes, and there is a need for a new proposal. And I absolutely disagree with some of the sentence here that the management is not too perceivable to innovations or not sensitive to innovations. No, it is. And there should be some factors which make people to be more perceivable or sensitive to innovations. We have a lot of the orders placed with us. We cannot cope with all of those. Yes, we export. We are involved in export, but the demand in domestic market is in our way to be proactive in the foreign markets. Why it happens so? Many developers all of a sudden realize that many products which were involved in for many decades, there is no demand for that any longer. And the peak of the leap and of the demand when they bought anything, not just anything, but we are through that, and the customer is very sensitive, and we have a very loose market, so to say. A very unstable market, and I dare say that we can strike other markets as well. We specifically took the key market which most developed. We verified 20% with the quality which can be create a comfortable environment. All the rest is discomfort. Like the parking lots instead of the yard, some strange walls instead of architecture, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into details, professional details here. Also, I would like to formulate the following thing, just to show the next slides, a slideshow, so to say. It's very difficult to hit or to enter the foreign market if your products doesn't have a great demand on your domestic market. So American programmers in Silicon Valley, they do something for themselves, or American movie industry, they do for themselves, first of all. We understand ourselves, we can do something for us, something good. But if we cannot do something good for ourselves, in the best case, we will be able to be kind of the secondary auxiliary supporters for some kind of the leading company, whatever. And that's why external markets are well needed, and there's interesting, very interesting, and based on our experience, our employees flew to Vienna to participate in the build new information, a new epoch, a new era of designing. And because we're talking about three-dimensional design of the buildings and the model, which makes it possible to verify all the, let's say, collision between the spaces and different engineering designs and solutions, and to calculate the heat and ventilation, whatever else, and the new impact. And we were pleasantly surprised that the Ukrainian architects and the Polish architects, they were at raptures while evaluating our work, because 300,000 square meters trading space, they do not build such huge facilities. They do not have the experience or the problems we have. If we are talking about the implement those projects, and they address us asking consultations. They say we have some projects in developing countries. So can you tell us how you worked on that? Terabytes of data. I might tell you. Well, we are not the only one who have this database, but we have some unique experience. Those who are interested in that.
The same is true about our neighbors. Our friends are doing handmade goods. First, they make these things for themselves and found that it is successful among Ukrainian customers, and now they sell it via post services and receive currency. The same. I absolutely agree with the colleague from the Academy. Sciences, this is the future for us, simply because they are developing countries. I recently came back from Astana. They have 300 days per year of wind. This is fresh wind, and they are ready to learn from their mistakes. Those who can make good product for themselves will be able to convince that this product will be good for other countries. If a person is not creative, it cannot participate in creative economy. Thank you, Oleksandr. In my industry, experience is slightly different. Only a small part of specific IT companies work for Ukraine, and there are just some exceptions among the companies who work both for Ukraine and external market. I would like to specify there are more high-tech product companies. There is different thing. We work for massive consumer. I think that we have covered all the industries. If to sum up the issues which was discussed by different industries, we understood that we need some unification, integration, or exchange platform. Because inside our industry we have different subsectors, content management and low-level IT. These are different things. And the external environment and expert economy, the regulation, knowledge of English, and master of English, and if we haven't missed anything, it's time to ask questions, or we may shift to our informal communication. Okay, if since we managed with the summary of our dialogue, we found out that all the spheres of creative industries are more or less similar, and we wish to increase the list of IT industries and creative industries. We have good agricultural business, but they need something like 500,000 people to have efficient production. While creative economy is very interesting, very high paid, since there are no further ideas. No further ideas. Okay, let's consider our first event on development of creative industries in Ukraine as successful, and I'm very grateful to Oleg, to the Ministry of Education, and see you next time. Bye bye.